Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome back to MVR. Today's stories will involve the growing strength of Facebook and ByteDance as well as VAL, the Virtual Athletics League, which is some amazing events going on where you can win awesome prizes by either competing or simply watching. So without further ado, let's jump in. So before we jump into today's main story, let's talk a little bit about Pico as well as the company who recently bought it, ByteDance. In case the name ByteDance doesn't ring a bell, it's a Chinese tech giant that's in control of TikTok and can safely be seen as the Chinese equivalent of Facebook. While the Oculus Quest is huge in the Western market right now, it's noticeably absent from the Chinese market, and this is mainly because Facebook is banned in China. Which means that even if you could acquire a headset, it wouldn't really be supported, since the use of a Facebook account in a country where the platform is banned becomes rather problematic. This absence of Oculus in the Chinese VR market has created the opportunity for Pico to create a competing product to the Quest 2, which is the Pico Neo 2. Now this headset features largely the same hardware as the Quest, which means that given enough time, this headset could become an actual competitor in the West. And one of the main selling points that it would have would be the lack of a required Facebook account while still having access to a similar feature set. Unfortunately, with the recent acquisition by ByteDance, we can safely assume that any hopes of Pico's HMDs remaining without a social login have become all but non-existent, which makes me wonder if a future where VR players do not have to subject themselves to massive forms of data mining will still be possible. Speaking of remaining free from data mining, if you're a VR enthusiast or someone who's just been looking to get into VR, then I'm sure that the name Facebook or Oculus rings a bell. Since the start of the modern VR revolution, Oculus has been one of the key players driving the technology forward. And especially since the acquisition by Facebook and the launch of the Oculus Quest, the companies have been dominating the VR market space, which is something that we covered on this channel before. In fact, their presence in the VR market is so strong that at the time of writing, Oculus has a near 100% market share in mobile consumer VR and over 60% over on Steam, which means that the vast majority of users as well as developers will have to deal with Facebook one way or the other. Following an investigation backed by the Attorneys General back in 2020, the FTC announced that it would file a formal lawsuit against Facebook for alleged anti-competitive practices in the social networking space. And the lawsuit built its case around two major pillars: anti-competitive acquisitions and anti-competitive platform conduct. Instead of being a competitive force in the market, the commission alleges Facebook of a buy or bury scheme, where Facebook targets upcoming competitive businesses and buying them before they become a threat. If the targeted business refuses to be bought, however, Facebook would then proceed to bury said competitor by engaging in further anti-competitive behavior. However, in June this year, a judge decided to throw out the case and declared that the FTC allegation of monopoly power on Facebook's part was unfounded and lacked clear evidence to support it. While it might seem like the end of it, the judge gave the FTC 30 days to amend their case, which they ultimately did. The filing is nearly 2 times the size of the original, and includes a lot of new information and examples. And if you've been following the news surrounding Oculus after it was acquired by Facebook, a lot of this is going to sound familiar. Back in 2013, Twitter attempted to take on part of Facebook's market share with their new app Vine, which for those of you who never heard of it, was a video sharing app much like what TikTok is today. Once the app began to gain traction, however, Facebook revoked access to APIs that would allow Vine users to find their Facebook friends on the new app, thus putting up an extra barrier for users looking to switch. In regards to this behavior, Holly Vadova, acting director for the FTC Bureau of Competition, had this to say: "This conduct is no less anti-competitive than if Facebook had bribed emerging app competitors not to compete. The antitrust laws were enacted to prevent precisely this type of illegal activity by monopolists." End quote. So you might be wondering what this has to do with VR directly. Well, if you think about it, we've seen this kind of behavior before. It's kind of like how on the Quest, the virtual desktop app got removed from the Oculus store once it became apparent users could play VR games from other stores with it by streaming them from their PC. While it did get let back onto the store after removing that functionality, Facebook only let them add it back in after they created their own version of remote streaming in the form of Airlink, which is again similar to how YourFit, an app that could be used to keep track of workout data while playing VR games, kept getting broken with each system update, up until the point that Facebook was ready to reveal their very own Oculus Move in order to compete with it. But perhaps the biggest sign of all is the massive acquisition spree that Facebook engaged in during the early stages of VR. Whenever it looked like a developer had breakthrough potential with their new game, Facebook quickly swooped in and acquired the studio. Not to forget that when SideQuest was gaining popularity as an alternate app store that was outside of Facebook's control, they created AppLab, which allows users to achieve the exact same thing but with slightly less artificially imposed hurdles, with the added benefit that app purchases now would go directly to Facebook instead of other platforms. So circling back to the lawsuit, you might be wondering how a case regarding an abuse of monopoly power in the social space has any effect on the VR side of things. Well, as the FTC states in their lawsuit, it's their goal to not only prove that Facebook holds a monopoly in the social networking space, but also to break that power through sanctions. And one of the weapons that the FTC and the courts can wield is forcing a company to break up for antitrust reasons, something which we've seen happen in the past to companies like Microsoft. One of the reasons why I think the move for a breakup is likely comes from the following statement by the FTC. Facebook is likely to reinstitute its conditioning or other similar anti-competitive practices when it next faces acute competitive pressures from a period of technological transition. Such pressures may arise, for example, around increased use of artificial intelligence or around Facebook's own view that future dominant technology companies will offer users a compelling metaverse, a virtual environment that hosts users in digital spaces, and that, as Mr. Zuckerberg recently said, will be the successor to the mobile internet. In other words, it seems likely that the FTC believes that simple sanctions like fines will have little long-term effect on Facebook as a whole, and that the next time a technological shift happens, they're likely to fall back into old habits, meaning that the only meaningful long-term sanction would be a forced breakup of its current solidified power to enable more entities to compete. Seeing as the FTC points out Facebook's own recognition of the VR metaverse as being the next thing, it might not be too crazy to think that the relationship between Facebook and Oculus might still become part of this case as it develops. That being said though, the case is still actively changing, so we'll have to see where the chips may fall. In the meantime, if you want to contribute to a more open VR experience, then probably the best thing you can do is reward and support developers who put effort into making their apps cross-platform. And in the likely event that you're an Oculus Quest owner, I highly suggest you give SideQuest a try. It has a massive library of experience that can't be found anywhere else. And best of all, it has VR ports of old school classics like Half-Life and Doom, which can provide you with hours of enjoyment for pennies on the dollar. Speaking of enjoyment, let me tell you a little about VAL, the Virtual Athletics League. The Virtual Athletics League is running their third fitness and esports event, the VR Summer Games, featuring tournaments, content creator collaborations, and giveaways. The month-long event is the largest multi-title tournament and fitness event in VR and is growing quickly. On the competitive side of things, there's a total prize pool of over $20,000, which can be won by competing in tournaments or challenges in games like Blast On, Fail VR, Larcenauts, and more. And if you don't feel like the competitive type, there's also a lot of prizes to be had, including winning an Oculus Quest 2 by watching events, participating in raffles, or by enjoying discounts on select Steam VR games by buying them through the One Arena store. So if you feel like taking a shot at winning some prizes, then check out the links in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.